I think I might have a new favourite taxi episode, or at least a favourite taxi scene, but it's right at the end of this batch of episodes, so I'll talk about that when we get there. Today I am, of course, talking about Taxi Season 2, episodes 21, 22, 23 and 24. This takes us to the end of Season 2. It's been a really great season. Looking forward to finding out what Season 3 has in store, and today there will be, as always, spoilers as I talk about the episodes. I'll share the key plot points and share some thoughts, so there'll be spoilers from now, and we'll start off with Season 2, Episode 21. Alex jumps out of an airplane, directed by the wonderful James Burrows. In fact, all of these are directed by Burrows, and this one is okay, but I didn't really care for it. Interestingly, there were no scenes in the garage at all, which is not a criticism, just an observation, which I thought was quite interesting. And Alex has decided to face his fears. He starts playing the piano, he's singing, it's a really great performance, and then he's boxing, and that went on for way longer than I wanted it to, but I don't care about boxing, so maybe that's personal preference. And then he wants to jump out of an airplane. And unfortunately, this is not Taxi's fault, but several years later, Cheers did an episode involving jumping out of an airplane, and it is so funny, it is so polished, it is so perfect that I kind of feel like this was never going to be as good. And it's a completely different narrative. Well, mostly a different narrative, but because I know how that concept can be done in a way that's hysterically funny, I kind of didn't enjoy this as much as I perhaps could have done. Not Taxi's fault, of course, but I just didn't think the concept was very entertaining. The episode has some great messages in it about facing your fears and finding joy in doing things that you might otherwise be scared of, but it was just very slow. Yes, I love the focus on Alex. Alex is often the character other characters come to for advice. We don't always get enough about Alex's story, Alex's life. We do in bits, but not as much as I'd like. So yes, I love that it's focusing on Alex. No, I didn't think the pacing was very good. Yes, I do like the message. So not a great episode, but it was okay. Then we come to Season 2, Episode 22, Art Work, and they're initially betting on boxing, and it doesn't go according to plan. And Alex does do a great Latka impression, though. Really thoroughly enjoyed that. And when it doesn't work out, they convince Elaine to let them pool their money together and invest in a piece of art so that the art will go up in price. Obviously, Elaine, working in the industry, could help identify pieces that are likely to increase in value within a relatively short space of time. Initially, she's hesitant, but finally she agrees, and then Louie wants in. Nobody wants Louie to be involved, but he has money, and he can contribute more money to the initial payments. So eventually, we have this, it's beautifully framed. We have Louie in the forefront, right up close to the camera, and in the background, we have the rest of them. And I think it might be one of the few times where we get all of the characters in shot at once. It doesn't happen that often. And it was just beautifully framed. Really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. Then they go to the auction for this painting. Really exciting. Of course, there's the anticipation of, will they get the painting? And they didn't. They were outbid. And just after the person who bid the highest was confirmed as the highest bidder, they learned that the painter died that morning, and that art piece instantly went up in value after that person had bought it. So needless to say, everybody's really irritated. I felt bad for them. I genuinely thought it was going to go their way. I don't know why I thought that. I think maybe I was just swept up in the excitement of the auction, and it ends with them all buying pieces of art. And at the very end, we have Elaine kind of parading around the garage to see their purchases, and I think it was very obvious what Louie's was going to be. And we get to see everybody else's choices, and some of them are quite interesting. It was good fun. It was a really entertaining episode, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And then we come to, I think, the first Taxi two-parter where I feel like it needed to be two parts. As much as I love the show, I have found that their two-parters are very slow, and they often have scenes that just drag on, and they don't need to be two-parters. This one actually works quite well. Season 2, Episode 23, Fantasy Borough Part 1. This one involves the fact that Tony had driven somebody from Fantasy Island. I've never seen Fantasy Island, but it doesn't affect my understanding of the show. And they all begin to fantasize about, well, their fantasies. And Tony's fantasy is about driving news journalist Eric Seravate. I apologise if I've mispronounced that. And then we we cut to Latka in Louie's outfit, which is funny. It's hilarious. And then we see him acting like Louie. And then we cut to Louie scurrying in Latka's outfit. And it's just absolutely fantastic. And I really, really loved it. We then have Bobby fantasizing about performing. He's singing on stage in this rather spectacular, sparkly outfit. And then Jim's fantasy involved him sitting in his apartment, and then this alien ship just drops in front of the window and invites him on board. And it looked great, visually really impressive, really engaging. Definitely worked really well. The light was fantastically done. And then Hervé Villechaize, I apologize if I've completely mispronounced that, from Fantasy Island, arrives to collect something he left in Tony's cab. And that's where we end the episode. And it was a lot of fun. And I got to the end and thought, yeah, I can see why this would be 2 parts, because there's a lot of substance, and of course we still have some characters who have not yet shared their fantasies, so it works really well. And that brings us to the 24th and final episode, Season 2, Episode 24, Fantasy Borough Part 2, and most of this focuses, well, I'd say about half of it focuses on Alex's fantasy, but his is a little different. He says that whenever he tries to fantasize, something in his head always goes wrong. The fantasy falls apart. And we see him driving the cab, and there's a woman in there called Tony. She's played by Priscilla Barnes, and she starts to slowly undress, and it's going really well. And then she reveals she's married. And then they encourage him to try again. We find out that she just said that for the sake of saying it, and things go really well. And then he crashes the car. And then he's encouraged to try again, and it's going really, really well. He's at, I assume, his apartment with Tony, and it's a beautiful scene. Everything seems so perfect. And then she seems to talk and talk and talk, which I thought was the problem. I thought that she was less interested in Alex and more interested in just talking. But the problem is that it turns out he is her uncle. Now, I don't think that he was fantasizing about a long-forgotten niece. I don't actually think that in real life she's a niece that he'd forgotten about. I just think that's what his mind made up. And, well, that obviously ruined it for him. We then come to Louie's. And Louie is the last rich man. And everybody else in the garage is freezing. He's with Elaine. He has this luxurious lifestyle. And he has Lassie. And my first thought was, is this one of the real Lassies? And I looked on IMDb, and the answer is I genuinely don't know, because when you go to IMDb's listing for Lassie, if you go from the Taxi episode, click through to the Lassie profile, she is credited as Lassie. There's only one listing for Lassie the actor, with credits from 1945 to 2019. So obviously that's not the one dog, because I don't think even Lassie could live that long. But it does make me believe that it's one of the Lassies. So if anybody can confirm that that dog is genuinely one of the dogs to have played Lassie, please feel free to let me know. But I'm going to assume it is. The dog did some wonderful tricks. It was absolutely adorable. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. More sitcoms should have dogs in them. And then we come to my favourite Taxi moment of all time, Elaine's fantasy. She starts to sing Lullaby of Broadway, which I love. Absolutely love the song. Doris Day's version is beautiful. And Elaine starts to perform. And then slowly, the other characters begin to join in as well. And they have the best facial expressions. And the actors genuinely looked like they were having a great time. And then we have this bit with a costume change. And they looked great. And Elaine looked amazing. And then they're all dancing. And then Latka comes in with sparklers, which I did not expect. And then at the very end, there are lights around the taxi. And they're dancing around it. And it was just magical. It was beautiful. It was so perfectly executed that I just loved every second of it. I loved the song, I loved the performance, I loved the costumes. It was stunning. I think Elaine by far had the best fantasy, but a fantasy involving Lassie could also come pretty close. It's gorgeous, easily my favourite Taxi moment, and as I said, maybe my favourite Taxi episode so far. I'm not sure. But as I said, the 2 parts definitely felt like they needed to be 2 parts, which is not the usual experience with Taxi. So very, very happy. I thought Taxi Season 2 Episodes 21, 22, 23, and 24 are absolutely fabulous. And needless to say, I'm very much looking forward to watching the next season.